Moses. All righty. Hi, everybody.
Hello again.
Hey, good to be with you. Thank you for last week, and ready to look into Amos 1 and 2. Let's open with this prayer that we started with last week from 1577, Sir Francis Drake. In fact, the confession that we did earlier was from like 300, so that's where the strange language came from. Let's pray. Disturb us, Lord, when we're too well pleased with ourselves, when our dreams have come true because we've dreamed too little, when we arrived safely because we sailed too close to the shore. Disturb us, Lord, when the abundance of things we possess, we have lost our thirst for the waters of life, have fallen in love with life, we have ceased to dream of eternity, and in our efforts to build a new earth, we have allowed our vision of the new heaven to dim. Disturb us, Lord, to dare more boldly, to venture on wider seas, where your storms will show your mastery. Where losing sight of land, we shall find the stars. We ask you to push back the horizons of our hopes and to push into the future in strength, courage, hope, and love. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. See, I'm trying to find the greatest little spot to sit. Okay, well, anyway. Sunday is Picnic in the Park. So after church on Sunday, we want everyone to either walk down or get in their vehicle and drive around and come to Methodist Park. The kids' area is going to have chicken, and it's going to be yum, so you're going to want to be there. Anytime we had a chance to go down to the Methodist Park, it's amazing, so I hope to see you there. Online photo directory is going on right now, the sign-ups. Walter, got your link all figured out?
I'm working on it.
Almost, okay, well. So the link is on the front of the website, and if you need help with that, someone will be in the Welcome Center on Sunday with computers to help you through. But we want to make sure everybody gets lined up for that. And then the Great Day of Joining is coming up on April 14th. And so if people are not a member of the church and they would like to become so, we're going to have a group of people joining the church on April 14th. That's Palm Sunday. It's going to be exciting. We've done just a little bit of work on that this week, and we've already got 13 people that are going to join, 13 adults that are going to join, and a bunch of kids. So this is exciting, and still waiting to hear back from some folks. A handful of folks that didn't know they weren't members of the church. So sometimes it just takes asking. And then a handful of people that we didn't know were, and they were, and it's just great. So it's exciting, and it's going to help us get organized as well. So opening question. Where did you see God this week? Where did you see God this week? Since we're kind of here and we're kind of intimate this evening, let's just raise our hands and share. Where did you see God this week? Sally?
On Saturday morning, I was just making the bed and working around. And for I don't want to say no reason at all, but I wasn't praying or in my prayer chair or anything. And I heard from the Lord. He said, "Little angel, sing my praise, little girl." And I've been singing in the church since I was 3 years old. And when he spoke that, I wasn't expecting anything like that. And I walked out and shared it with my husband, and it was amazing how much he felt that the Lord truly did speak to me.
Yeah.
And when we went to church last Sunday at Praise Fellowship in the afternoon, I don't know if you know Scott Windrum, but he's from Austin area, and he was there Sunday. And my husband shared that with him, and the voice was just extremely high. And
Wonderful.
I was singing, so Saturday.
Yeah. Wonderful, wonderful. Anybody else? Ken and Marge?
I definitely saw the Lord on Friday. I guess more or less the power of prayer was with us last Friday when my son had to have surgery.
We're here now, so you can start.
You want to stay on the side? You gotta go the other way.
Okay, Marge, would you do me a favor and just start over?
Yeah.
I want to hear what you're saying.
I said I definitely saw God last Friday.
Mhm.
If nothing else, I definitely felt the power of prayer as my son underwent surgery last week.
Mhm.
And to see where he went from Sunday to Monday, Friday to Monday was just amazing, his comeback from that, because
Wonderful.
we really did not think he would survive the surgery. So
Wonderful. Thank you.
the Lord is good.
Yeah. Ken? Yes, sir.
I saw it definitely because, as you know, we got back from Florida where my sister had been into a very serious car accident. I saw God working through people who He gives special talents to and how they use it. And so she is on the road to recovery. There's a lot of difficulty, but she's on recovery. God is good.
And she has a date to get out still. Is that? She has a release date?
April 3rd.
Okay. Very good. Very good. Well, we had a wonderful memorial service in here for Judy Birch this morning, and the meal following was one of the best. I don't want to make fun of anybody else's teams, but boy, it was just on. It was great. And we had funeral potatoes. That was the, Matt brought up a recipe, and on it was funeral potatoes for their family. So I think Phyllis Sisson cooked that up. It was just wonderful. So, well, very good, very good. Let's begin with reading a little bit of James. So, if you've got your Bible, which you might, because it's Bible study, peek back into the back and find your book of James. This is very brief and very short. Come on. There it is. After the Timothys and the Hebrews. And I'm going to walk over here and turn the air down a little bit. Are y'all
Good.
Yeah, please.
The metal in my leg says thank you.
Hopefully that'll do something. All right. James 1, 22 through 27. James 1, 22 through 27. You must be doers of the word, and not only hearers who mislead themselves. Those who hear but don't do the word are like those who look at their faces in a mirror. They look at themselves, walk away, and immediately forget what they were like. But there are those who study the perfect law, the law of freedom, and continue to do it. They don't listen and then forget, but they put it into practice in their lives. They will be blessed in whatever they do. If those who claim devotion to God don't control what they say, they mislead themselves. Their devotion is worthless. True devotion, the kind that is pure and faultless before God the Father, is this: to care for orphans and widows in their difficulties, and to keep the world from contaminating us. Last week, I want to do a quick review of a couple of the things we hit last week. We talked a little bit about what a prophet was. Amos is a prophet, one of the minor prophets, but one of the first prophets. Sometimes we think that prophets talk about things that are going to happen in the future, and sometimes that's true, but not always. And sometimes a prophet comes in and shares a word from God. Here is where we're off, community. Here's where we're off. Here's where we're sinning. Here's where God needs you to listen again, because we've lost our way. We've lost ourselves from the promises that God has given us in the past. So prophet is hard job. Prophet is hard job. A pastor plays a role between kind of being a prophet and a priest and a pastor. And I'll tell you what, friends, it's a whole lot easier to be the pastor than it is to sometimes be the prophet and speak words that are typically not things we want to hear. And so that's the work of the prophet. We spent quite a bit of time trying to set up the social world, the social context of not just the book of Amos, but really the whole Bible, to try and know that this is the lens that we read the Bible through. We see these things happening in the time of the Bible, which can change the way we read the stories and understand the stories and the urgency of some of the work in the stories. So we laid out four points about the social world: that it was politically oppressive, very politically oppressive. Most people, 95%, didn't have a voice in the community at all. It wasn't any voice at all. They just did whatever the higher-ups, elites, said that we were going to do. It was economically exploitative. So economically exploitative, most all of the money that was made by this agricultural system went to up in the castles, right? It was chronically violent, and we don't live in a time where every day we wonder if someone's going to run into our house and murder us and kick us off of our land. But that was kind of their daily life, was chronic violence. And then finally, the fourth was that it was ordained by religion. That they would claim the way that it's set up, the way with these kings and the elites and you peasants and you people that are getting crushed. And last week we shared they had half the lifespan of the elites. That's just the way God made it. And so if God ordained it, God set it up that way, you wouldn't want to fight against God, would you? So we're going to look at Amos 1 and 2 today. And so I want to start by looking just at the very beginning, the setup. We learn a little bit about Amos, and then we set up this position of God and God's judgment at the beginning. So the very beginning, Amos 1:1. These are the words of Amos. Remember last week we said that Amos probably didn't sit down and write all this out. This was Amos was speaking in short oracles, as many of the prophets did. Short oracles and stories, and then their followers or leaders or the people that remembered would write them down later. These are the words of Amos, one of the shepherds of Tekoa, which was a little bit, did we say, south of Jerusalem, I think? He perceived these things concerning Israel 2 years before the earthquake. I told you last week we knew when the earthquake was. I read another thing this week that said we don't know when the earthquake was. In the days of Judah's king Uzziah, and in the days of Israel's king Jeroboam, Joash's son. Last week we talked again about how Israel was split into two. There was Israel in the north and Judah in the south. Judah is where Jerusalem was. And then the prophecy, I suppose, begins. He said, "The Lord roars from Zion. He shouts from Jerusalem. The pastures of the shepherds wither, and the top of Carmel dries up." So first of all, we're setting up a lion roaring and a lion running out into the field. And I read a book earlier that kind of set that up and said, sometimes we think of lions in zoos, and we get there in time to see the lions be fed, and we're like, ooh, that's pretty cool. But if we take it out of the nice docile setting of a zoo and we put it out in the wilderness, out in Africa, and we see a gazelle and we see it eating and ripping flesh and the power, and when it roars, the whole plains hears it. Sometimes when we hear, the Lion of Judah, we're like, yeah, the lion, like in a circus. But we got to think about the power and the awesome and the might of what's being set up here. That the lion is coming, and all of the fields of the shepherds withered, and from here to there, north to south, everything is going to be affected and changed by God's judgment. So it's a big setup. It's not just quickly think of a lion and, well, that's nice. The Lion of Judah, whatever, okay. And then we see this poetic formula. So hopefully if you read Amos 1 and 2, I hope you went, why do they keep saying this thing? What does that mean? So we read this for 3 crimes of the city, and for 4, I won't hold back the judgments.
Yeah, what does that mean? Because I couldn't figure out what it was.
Exactly.
My Bible says for 3 sins of Gaza, even for 4, I will not remit. Why didn't you say for 4?
That's a great question. So let's talk about that. So this is what we think. We think that this is just simply a poetic formula. This is a poetic formula, and the best that I could gain is that God has mercy. God is a merciful God. which in that context of all the gods at that time, there was no mercy in the gods. Okay, gods were angry, gods were mad. You did something wrong and you got smote or smite or whatever that word is, right? But here's a God who has at least 3 reasons to destroy you. And God is merciful and does not do that. And so the setup is humanity, these towns, the poetry is, you have sinned 3 times, and yet I've remained merciful, but you've tipped the scale now. You've gone to 4. And so for 3, hey, Gaza, for 3 crimes we were okay, but now for 4, I can't hold back the punishment. And so that's the best that I'm seeing and finding. It's 1 too many. But now you've tipped the scale. And then I also think it just has a poetic way, because we're going to talk about 8 nations. We're going to go through 8 nations, and so it's going to give that rhythm and that rhyme. And a lot of times these were poems, and they had a flow to them and those kind of things. So that's what I believe that looks like when we're reading this strange line for 3 crimes or 3 transgressions, whichever version you're looking at. So we're going to look at 7 nations, all right? And David, do you have a map to show me? Okay, well,
Bless you.
Thank you. Sorry.
Shalene just likes attention during Bible studies. Phones and all that. Bless you. All right, so this map didn't quite look like it wants to, but hopefully you can see it a little bit. There's a purpose here. Go through these nations and these towns. I want you to find them on the map, because I think it's making a point. Number 1 is Damascus. And you can see Damascus at the very top. I hope you can.
I can't.
All right? Damascus is far away. It's at the other top. And it's going to say, for 3 crimes in Damascus, and for 4, I won't hold back punishment, because they've harvested Gilead with sharp iron tools, and I'll send down fire. And then lots of bad stuff, and lots of places we don't know where they are, right? And then number 2, for 3 crimes of Gaza, and for 4, find Gaza. Gaza is at the bottom left, right? So that's far away on the bottom left. Number 2 is Gaza. Gaza, for 3 crimes, and for 4, I won't hold back punishment, because they rounded up entire communities and handed them over to Edom. Number 3, verse 9, the Lord proclaims for 3 crimes of Tyre. Tyre, we go back up there, but it's closer than Damascus was. Okay, some of y'all are starting to catch on to this now. Number 4 is Edom. So Edom is this kingdom, I guess, down on the bottom right. Okay, Edom. And then Ammonites. Ammon. So we're up just on the right side of the river there. Number 6, Moab. Where's Moab? There it is, okay. Moab. Number 7. Okay, so we've gone through these 6. The first 6 are nations that we've probably been at war with. The 6 are probably nations that are other peoples. I don't know how far we want to go with this, but it's probably other nationalities. I don't know if you want to say they're other races. They're other people. And so Amos is saying, hey, Israel, listen. The Lord is a lion, and he's ravishing, and he's coming through, and he is punishing Damascus and Gaza and Tyre and Edom and Ammon. And you would imagine and think about hearing this, the Israelites are going, oh yeah, yes, down with them. We've been fighting them, they've been fighting us. Well, it would be great to see the God come through with his justice and destroy them for all the bad things that they've done. All right? 7.
What are the tribes? Judah?
We're getting to Judah.
Okay, but what are the Israelite tribes? What is Judah one of them?
Dan, is Dan in there? I don't know. Let's look at that. Maybe. 7 is Judah. Judah's like their brother. Okay? There's been some warring with Judah. It hasn't been perfect, but Judah's getting closer. And so, hey, God's going to come and destroy and bring judgment on Judah. All right? So, I got a question for us. When you were being raised, or when you raised your children, was there anybody in your neighborhood that you didn't want your kids hanging out with because they were bad? And because they were always getting in trouble, and maybe getting in trouble with the law? Did you have that person? You had some of those people. My son's 11. I haven't yet had that conversation yet, but why don't we stay away from that guy? Because he's a bad guy. What do you think about those people that are, when they're neighbors and they're constant sinners and they're yeah, try to separate yourself. You want to get away from their evil or their sin or their... Yeah, that's a good point. Away from influence. You following me?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a little bit? So we have these neighbors and they're bad, and God's going to come and get them. We get a little bit closer when it's the 7th in 2:4, when it's Judah, because then it's your brother, and you're going, oh, yeah, I guess them too. Okay.
Pastor Allen,
Yes.
I grew up in a Mennonite community,
Yes.
and I'm still trying to learn how to deal with because they didn't put us down, and even in the summertime when we wore shorts, they treated us like we were one, and were just simply...
So Sally grew up in a Mennonite community,
Mhm.
peaceful, Quaker.
Quaker town was
Yeah.
to the
Okay.
right, and Amish were to the left. Right outside of Philadelphia.
You're seeing the homiletical gotcha that's about to show up. You're thinking, we're getting it. Homiletically, Amos is going far away to those people over there, and those people over there. And if we were to do it today, if we were going to use this homiletical gotcha today, we might say, and y'all forgive me if I offend anybody, but we might say, Iran. You know, the way Iran treats people, and the way that they do this to that. And boy, God would want to come and really punish Iran. And then, well, there's North Korea. And we know about Kim Jong-un and and all of that, and the things that they do down there. And we know that God would want to come and judge them harshly. And then there's Venezuela, and we'd be riled up. We'd be like, that's right. Come on, preacher, we're going to go get them. Or politician or whoever, right? So it's a homiletical gotcha. Might get even closer. And then the speaker might say, well, and then Mexico. And some in the room would go, that's right. And then some in the room would go, wait a minute, I got a neighbor that's from Mexico. That's getting a little close. But, if God's going to judge them, and they say Canada. I'm like, dang, that's kind of like Canada. There's not too much wrong with Canada. You see where it's coming. Because the 8th is them. The 8th is Israel. And so we've riled up the listeners. We've used this homiletical tool to say, let's talk about the bad people. And everyone's like, that's right, those are bad people. God's going to get those bad people. And then you say, you know what? Well, we're the bad people too. And you go, oh, dang, you got me. Okay? Let's read that. Amos 2:6. Homiletical gotcha. We've talked about Iran and North Korea and Venezuela, Mexico, and then Amos says, and then you guys, your community. The Lord proclaims for 3 crimes of Israel and for 4, and you'll notice this one's much longer than the other ones, okay? I won't hold back the punishment because they've sold the innocent for silver, and those in need for a pair of sandals. They crush the head of the poor into the dust of the earth. push the afflicted out of the way. Father and son have intercourse with the same young woman. We don't know a whole lot about that. Degrading my holy name. They stretch out beside every altar on garments taken in loan. In the house of their God they drink wine bought with fines they've imposed. Yet I destroyed the Amorite before them. So God's starting to say, or God through Amos is starting to say, I did a lot for you. Parents, have we ever said that to our kids? I did last Saturday. Okay. Yet I destroyed the Amorite before them, whose height was tall as cedar trees and whose strength was as strong as oak trees. I destroyed his fruit above and his roots below. I also brought you up out of the land of Egypt and led you for 40 years in the wilderness to lay claim to the land of the Amorite. I raised up some of your children to be prophets and some of your youth to be Nazirites. Isn't this so, people of Israel, says the Lord? But you made the Nazirites drink wine, and commanded the prophets, saying, you won't prophesy. So now I will oppress you, just like a cart is weighted down when it's full of harvested grain. Fast runners will find no refuge. The strong will lose their strength. The mighty will be unable to save their lives. Those who shoot the bow won't survive. Fast runners won't escape. Those who ride horses won't save themselves. The bravest warrior will flee away naked in that day, says the Lord. Question. We're talking about that neighbor's kid and the problems and what we do to separate from the neighbor's kid. What do you do if it's your kid? How does that setup change when no longer is it the kid across town, but it's your kid? Let's discuss what are some of the elements of that when you've raised the child and you've done all the things for the child, and you come back from spring break and you say, I want you to sit here and appreciate the meal that we just got home and we're tired and we cooked it for you and here it is. Don't tell me it's disgusting. Not that I would ever say that to my son. What do you think? You do some punishing. Okay.
I think in that sense it's more personal because
Okay.
like depending on, I mean, for me, like I know I would have raised my son to know better and to do better, and if he didn't do that and he did something bad or whatever, then he's not just breaking the rules or whatever, but he's breaking my trust and my rules and what I taught him, and it's more personal in that
Okay.
matter.
I
And
like that.
in the same sense with like with Israel, it's more personal because they know that what God's laws are. God personally taught them, and like all of that. Like with the 40 years in the wilderness, like he spent that time teaching them
Yeah.
everything, and these other cities didn't know as much. So like they were punished and they didn't know it, but Israel was punished and they did know it.
Uh-huh.
So in that sense, like it's worse, it's more personal, I'm
That's
getting
excellent.
it. Yeah.
That's excellent.
Yeah.
I was going to get the iPad and turn it towards you and let you take over. That's great. Caitlin said it's personal. Because some of it's, yeah, my kid messed up, but then it's like, ooh, me, because this is mine, and this is what I did. And I liked your second point that you taught them the rules. It wasn't Johnny John. Who's the Beaver? Eddie Cleaver? Eddie Haskell. It wasn't Eddie Haskell across the street. Because I'm not exactly sure what his parents taught him, but I know what I taught you, and I specifically remember telling you not to live that way or not to do that. So yeah, I think it does change a little bit, and maybe it just kind of underlies the constant struggle we see through the whole Bible, but also the Old Testament in particular, with this loving God, this father figure, this parent figure, and I've raised you, I've trained you, I've given you options, I've given you ways, I've forgiven you, and this is it.
Mhm.
But if you've read to the end of the story, you know it's not. I don't know. What do y'all think? Is it going to be, should it be less, or will it be less, or is it harder to do the same, or?
That would want to make it stronger because you can't make as many allowances, but you also can't walk away.
Mm-hmm.
They're yours. You can't just turn a blind eye or shut the door.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you still tell them that you love them.
Yes.
You know,
Right.
even though they did wrong.
Yeah.
And you explain what they did wrong, and
Right.
but you still love them
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
you forgive them.
Right.
You never give up. I mean, personally, one of them just
Mm-hmm.
and you go, yeah, I love you, and I will never give up,
Yeah.
never.
Mhm.
So, and I'll never stop loving you. And
Right.
Yeah.
that doesn't mean I won't punish you, but
What I think I'm learning in that conversation is the one I'm talking to doesn't understand that yet. You don't understand this love that I have for you. And when I say that's great. That's great. Very good thought. I didn't put in too many notes in here. I didn't put any notes in here about this, but it's also interesting to see the balance of this lion figure, judgment, but at the same time, this lion has an element of grace and so it's all tied in at the same place. And I don't know if we see that anywhere, if we can even fathom how that works. How we have a God of justice and the lion and there's this and that, but there's an incredible amount of grace mixed up into it. So, Walter Brueggemann notes, he's an Old Testament scholar, he notes what we're supposed to see about Israel now. Israel has come out of Egypt. Israel's had its hard ups and downs. There's been Babylon, but now they're the ones with some prosperity, and they're the ones with some power and some problems, and that they have recreated Egypt within themselves. That they were in Egypt and God got them out, and now they're back here and they've got themselves these monarchs, they've got themselves these kings, and they're basically just doing Egypt again. And God's got to hear for the voice of the needy within Israel. And I'm pondering this idea that Egypt has been recreated within Israel. And I'm pondering and I'm thinking Genesis, I'm thinking Adam and Eve. And Adam and Eve had what they had, and they needed more. And they were enticed by having more. Thinking about Egypt and these pharaohs and their need to have more and to be higher and to do pyramids and to not ever be forgotten. I'm thinking about the monarchs that we're looking at here in the time of Amos, and they're in constant war. Last week we talked about this warring cycle where if you squeezed all the stuff you could out of your peasants, you needed more peasants. So you went to war, and that's why you had this annual battles and these wars to get more peasants so that you get more money and you can continue this system. Thinking about Rome. Rome's expansion, right? I'm thinking about Napoleon. I don't know a whole lot more about Napoleon. Mark likes to tell us about Napoleon. I didn't put it in my notes, but you got, Great Britain was, the sun never sets, and all that. And I'm wondering, is there something in us that does that? Is there something in our culture? Do you sense that? Is there this move that we saw of Israel finding their freedom and getting a little bit of freedom? Yes? And
He's talking to you.
yeah, I should listen.
Well, that's part of our problem. Even in America, we go and we fight these wars and we expect that country to be like us.
Okay.
Our democracy.
Yeah.
And they don't want us. They want to do their thing.
Yeah.
So we go there and we try to make them do our thing, and that's an example why we're in Afghanistan 17 years later.
Okay.
I have
Yeah.
a comment about that.
Mm-hmm.
But when they come to this country,
Mm-hmm.
they want the freedom that we have. And I had a lady scream at me at the grocery store saying, I hate your country, I hate that shirt you have on, you don't have freedom. And I said, if I go to your country, would I have the same freedom that I have from my country? And I later went into the store and mentioned it to,
Yeah.
and they,
Yeah.
I've never seen her again. But she became angry because she said she hated our country. And she had on the cover
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
yeah.
Dean, are you saying maybe we're a little selfish? Isn't quite the right word.
I know where you're going. Yeah.
But when we're in power, and we look at others and we say they're wrong because they're not like us, and so the world's going to be a better place if we expand what we're doing and who we are. If we're Rome or Great Britain, or you use the example of
Our problem is we think we have all the answers to the time.
okay,
And we always try, just like some progressives now, going
Uh-huh.
and saying, let's compare ourselves to this other country and their great health care. Well, when you dig down,
Okay.
you'll find that, yeah, they got great health care.
Okay.
You spend 50 to 60% of your income in taxes.
well, and I'm just thinking even within the country, we've got the states and you know what's best up here in this part of the country may not be the best here, but I think there's something there. Amanda.
What about personally? When is enough for our personal gain? Oh, good. I'm glad that we're on the same page. But
What an amazing point you make,
I
Amanda.
was reading a financial blog, and
Yes.
he was
Yes.
comparing two people, and one, there was never enough. It was always about accumulating more and more and more. And then another one has a philosophy of enough.
Yeah.
I have enough to meet my needs. I have enough to be able to charitably give.
Yes.
I do not need more. And when you reach that point of I have enough, a lot of times it's easier to be, I don't know, happy in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Yeah. Mark?
So just to kind of springboard, something that was taught to us, and it was actually taught here by our previous Bible study leader. He said something, and it stuck in my mind that and it was kind of it was approachable because I thought of him being a counselor and thinking about how you have to explain to young kids how to curb some of those wants and desires in their own lives. And he'd said to us that our wanters are broken. And I had to laugh. Your wanters are broken. But what's interesting, and I started thinking about it, it stuck with me to this day, is that I think within all of us at times, we find that our wanter is broken. That we're wanting way more than we need.
Right.
We're wanting. And I see it now with my two sons.
And it never satisfies.
And it never satisfies. Like my son, I could hand him a piece of chocolate, and a few seconds or a few minutes later, he would want another piece of chocolate.
Why didn't you give me 2 pieces?
And why not give me 4? Why not have dessert a second time? Why not take a piece of chocolate to bed? Why not? And the story doesn't end. But I find that I hate to say it's something I feel like that might be part of us, but I feel like this idea of wanting is something that culturally we see, but I think in children we can see that it's also present.
Contentment.
What you require, what it is.
Right.
Some is like, I read a book by J. Paul Getty one time, How to Be Rich. And he, in the beginning, he's like 85 and he's reflecting back on his life. He's actually kind of sad.
Yeah.
He's sitting there going, well, come to me, how to be a good husband, and I'm probably not the right guy, because I've been married on like 4 or 5 times. And he goes, it's not their fault, they were all good women, it was me. I was too busy trying to earn millions, and I never paid attention to them.
Yeah.
One of you come to me for advice on how to be a good parent, I'm probably not the right person either, because out who you want to stomp on the way going up, and
Yeah.
who you want to be maybe coming down, because find out what you're going to give up.
Yeah.
Because you're going to give up family, friends, you know, like that, and to acquire wealth. So it was almost like Solomon looking at going,
Yeah.
you know, I've got everything and I have nothing, you know, empty.
Yeah. Very good point, y'all. Yeah, me. I was thinking about my house and my car, my computer, television, my bank account, wanting all that to grow. Not content with where we are now, wanting to expand it. Our wanters are broken. I like that. Richard Rohr is a Franciscan monk up in New Mexico, and always the way he says is the Catholic Church doesn't know what to do with him, so they put him up in New Mexico. Wonderful author, and he's written a book that talks about the two halves of life. And he says the first half is accumulating stuff in your box, or making your box larger, and this struggle that Mark was sharing of more and more, and not happy, and not listening to your family because you're worried about your name and your prestige. And he says, hopefully, at a certain point, you tip into the second half, which is more about appreciation of who you are and what you have, and sharing. And he says in the book, says not everybody gets there. Some people, they go full bore until they die. But it's a really powerful book. What do you see as Jesus' message to these points that we're making? You think about the stories of Jesus and the teachings of Jesus. What does he say about our wanters being broken? What does he say to an Israel that was free and then found themselves abusing others? This maybe what if we've claimed that there's this inner need for us to either have someone that we're pressing down on or accumulating more.
I feel that he's saying, be happy where you are. I've blessed you. You have the beauty, the peace, all I've blessed you with.
Yeah.
You do not need more. And you feel the joy and the happiness that he has blessed you.
Okay. So the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount, does Jesus say some things about people who are blessed? Blessed are
They.
the poor. Blessed are the meek. Right? Any other scriptures or thoughts come into mind?
I think when you're spiritually empty, it's hard to have happiness. When you're spiritually not filled, and you're not focused where you need to be focused.
Okay.
So then you are moving outside the boundaries of
Yeah.
that's like
Kind of that imagery that we would use of, you know, if Jesus is full in your spirit, then you're content. But if it's not there, you're always finding that thing to put in there.
I think if you're not spiritually grounded, there is no appreciation, or there is no appreciation for the things that you have. You're
Yeah.
focused on what you don't have.
When he talks about the flowers in the field and how their beauty is, and
Excellent.
will he not provide
Yeah.
even better for you?
Do not worry about tomorrow.
Right.
Let tomorrow take care of itself. Hey, God's got the flowers covered and the birds covered, and you know, those are just like little creatures. But God's got you taken care of.
Yes.
And I think if we read through, we see that again and again and again, because we need to hear it again and again and again. And also, if we, again, talk about the social context and who he's speaking to, he's in the Roman Empire talking about these things. So, all right. I'm supposed to wrap this up now. So let's say some quick things. Amos is a book of justice. We talked about that last week. I want us to note, and this may be something that you've thought of before, there's a pretty significant difference between compassion and justice, between acts of charity or acts of mercy and justice. They're both needed in our society. They're both very valid. They're things that we should be doing. When we talk about compassion and charity and mercy, we're talking about seeing someone in need and helping them in their need. This person needs clothes, and we're going to go get them clothes. We talked about that from the book of Isaiah last week, right?
Right.
Justice is a little different. Justice not only feeds the person who is hungry, but says, why is this person hungry? Justice doesn't just put the fire out. It says, why does this thing keep coming on fire? And what do we need to do? And so justice is harder work, and justice is longer work. Amos is talking about justice and injustice, and God being angry at the injustice of these people. Asking the questions, why is it that there are 95% of the people that have absolutely no say in the society? Why is it that this many people used to own land, but they don't anymore because they had to sell it because you were taxing them until they had to leave everything? And so that's the hard work. And so when we are thinking about being a church, when we are thinking about being people of faith, to think about our balance in our life and in what we do, not just with charity and mercy, which again, hear me say, is needed and valid and it's important, but do we have a piece of justice ministries as well? This is where I would like to share that are there any choir members in here?
Well, I sang in the choir for
Okay, good.
years.
Well, I'm just looking. I'm trying to look at my 7 o'clock to see if we all need to go.
Oh.
The United Methodist Church has the General Board of Church and Society. Their location is next to the Supreme Court building in Washington, D.C. It is a pie-shaped building, very funky pie-shaped building. It's the United Methodist Church right on the front. It's the only denomination that has a building that close. Across the street from is the Capitol, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's meaningful. We're not just food pantries, and we're not just helping others get clothes, but we're asking powers, why is it that that person's hungry? When I was there as a young pastor, literally it was called Young Pastor something, I couldn't go anymore. We were talking to Congress people about cigarettes and how they were labeled and how they weren't under the FDA, or maybe they were, anyway. We were talking about coal and coal plants and people that downstream that were getting sick. And so that's the kind of question that we struggle with is justice ministry. Now the obvious thing there is that in the United Methodist Church, where we're so diverse, that's hard work, because we might go over there and start talking about, somebody else may disagree with us, right? But just to lift that up, this book is about justice. I think in our Hole in the Gospel book that we're looking at, I hope that that's kind of where we get at the same time. It's not just going and painting a house, but it's saying, why is this whole community in a shape where they can't paint their own house? And those kind of things are the things that people of God are also invited to be invested in and help out with. A lot of that's gotten very political the last few years, and I want to encourage you, just because you hear the word justice doesn't mean you have to run from it. That's difficult stuff, okay? Let's end with Luke 4. Somebody turn to Luke 4 and read this for me. This is the Jesus mission statement. I'm going to turn to Isaiah. There it is. Okay. So somebody read Luke 4, 18 and 19 for us. This is how we'll close tonight. Y'all did some great. I think Caitlin gets a high five. That's great. Oh my gosh.
I need a
Yes,
high
sir.
five.
How can hierarchies and power structures still exist and be just?
Wow. How can power structures exist and be just at the same time?
Because we see them all over the place, even from small business to
Okay.
to government to biblical times. They
Yeah.
seem to have existed for a long time, but they always seem to coincide with injustices at the same time.
It's so easy for them to be unjust. And maybe it's leadership, it's a culture, it's a society. I think it's so easy for us to close our eyes and not see that around us. It goes back to that me thing. If I'm the CEO or I'm the owner of a business, I'm worried about myself. I don't go to sleep at night worrying about my employees getting a fair wage or whatever that might be. And maybe I do, but that's a really good question. When I get the answer to that, I'll write a book and
Make a lot of money.
I'll pay the debt off in the church. Okay. All right, who's got my Luke 4? Who's got my Luke 4 for me?
That's the same
The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because He has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim release to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind. Let the oppressed go free. To proclaim the year of the Lord's favor.
And that's where Jesus ends, and he closed the scroll. Everyone in the room knew Isaiah 61, which is what he was reading. And listen, he stops before he says, "And the day of vindication for our God." And I wonder if the people in the room heard that and heard a new sense and a new purpose and a new thing that Jesus was bringing. Because God didn't send his Son in the world to judge the world, but that the world might be saved through him, and something new and something different was going on. Isaiah 61, 1 and 2 is the scroll that Jesus reads that day, and he stops there. Friends, it is very much time to go. I love our very quick, good Bible study, and y'all did some great conversation today. Thank you again. We have 3 more weeks, so hope to see you next week. We'll start communion service at 6 if you can make it. Sally, let me
5
help.
minutes?
Let me help for a second.
Okay.
Sally has some cards that she is going to mail to her son in Kuwait and to hand out to the soldiers there.
Mm-hmm.
And she would like it if you would take one of her cards and fill it out and bring it Sunday. She's going to be in the Welcome Center and receive those and take those and mail them off.
Right.
You can do them now, but if you're headed out, you can take it and fill it out, and it would be a blessing to the troops. And
Also, if you have some cards at home, it would really be appreciated to send a card, and I could share you a real quick story, what happened a couple years ago in Iraq, but if you don't have the time, that's okay too. How many of you could write a card and bring it Sunday? My son is in charge of almost 500 soldiers. He does language communications and translates for the U.S., but an address I'm not allowed to give you, that's